It's been just over a year since I first experienced NieR Automata. At the time, I was falling out of touch with video games as a whole. Nothing I would play captivated me. It was difficult to get into anything new, as everything that I tried ended up in disappointment. It took my good friends a lot of convincing to finally stop talking about playing Automata and finally commit to it. When the day finally came to play, I couldn't put my controller down. From the very first words uttered, I knew that this game was going to be something different. The opening hour hooked me so much, in fact, that within the span of 3 days, I had finished the game in its entirety and reached the true ending. The second I was done, I immediately started writing a mini essay about Automata to my best friend, who had been so adamant that I go through this game until completion. NieR Automata activated a spark inside me that I didn't even know was there. One that was so inspired by the creativity and absurdity that was this game, and how it broke through the mold of what conventional storytelling is, alongside its truly mind-bending execution of using video games as a medium to tell stories. I knew that I wanted to make a video on Automata, but this was not something to take lightly. This isn't just a review of a game I enjoyed. NieR Automata is a work of art that I truly and thoroughly respect. And to undertake any sort of review or analysis is something that I wanted to only tackle when I knew I was ready to do. It's been a year, and after finally allowing myself to play the game again and take a more analytical look at why NieR Automata affected me so much, I can finally say that I'm ready. So welcome to the analysis of the game that changed my life, NieR Automata. Describing what exactly NieR Automata is always tricky, even boiling it down to something as simple as what type of game is Automata? Because even within the first 30 minutes, it goes from a perspective-flipping twin-stick shoot-'em-up combating flying enemies to a slightly more traditional third-person hack-and-slash, all within the gap of a 10-second cutscene. The whole game from start to finish is jam-packed full of these perspective-switching changes in both genre and gameplay. This is, of course, a Yoko Taro specialty. Now, saying Yoko Taro, who is Automata's game director, is imaginative would be the understatement of the century. He is infamous for using video games to the fullest and not being tied down to being one-trick ponies. The original NieR and now Replicant did this beforehand, but Automata is my favorite implementation of these switches. It isn't just on a large scale with the transitions between 3D, 2D, and gaming subcategories, but on a smaller scale as well. How Automata's masterful camera work is showcased. Just going up staircases is a dimensional change. Same with specific corridors or lower levels of dungeons. Automata doesn't really like you getting too comfortable with any particular playstyles or even ways of viewing the game. Sure, most of the game will take place in a more traditional hack-and-slash style, but you're gonna have a few curveballs thrown at you. NieR Automata, from a gameplay and pure level of fun perspective, is masterful. It's clear that the feedback towards the clunkiness and less inspired combat from the original NieR was really taken into consideration for Automata, because this game is smooth. On consoles, frame rate is always right about the 60 frame mark, and according to Digital Foundry, it even has somewhat of a miracle port on Switch thanks to Virtuous. Actually diving into the gameplay, Automata's combat is, for the most part, tremendous, apart from a few small things that I would have preferred to have been executed differently. Getting into what I do like first, however, combat in Automata strikes a really great balance between being easy enough for most people to get into, and also having a level of technicality to the combat that's high enough for those who really want to challenge themselves to learn all there is. Your standard light and heavy attacks, the majority of what you're going to be using throughout your playthrough, are both visually impressive and simplistic in design, and there are combos for you to learn. However, I do wish they were a little more prominent in the main combat loop. Something similar to how the original God of War trilogy gave you access to a larger catalog of combos as you upgraded your weapons throughout the game. That is one thing I wish that was done slightly better, as you have most of your combat tools within the first few hours of the game, and apart from minor changes in stats, there isn't a whole lot you can really do to level up your playthrough, then continue to master and hone your existing skills, such as dodge. The dodge in Automata is so effective it's borderline too good. Tap the right trigger at just the right time, and 2B will neatly phase through or away from any incoming attack, no matter how heavy it is. You can capitalize on dodge even more by chaining multiple in a row or hitting it at the perfect sweet spot to counterattack an enemy. Now, on to weapons themselves, you have 4 types of weapons to choose from. Just as in the original NieR, small swords, large swords, spears, and then finally we have a new one, your hands. But unlike the original game, you can use two types at once. My personal preference is to have the light attack be a really quick and agile small sword, and then counterbalancing that with a really powerful heavy large sword to finish the job. Spears are the one oddball that I personally just didn't jive with. They're a ton of fun and provide you with a slightly larger range than a normal small sword, but in consequence are also slower. There is absolutely a type of player whose spears are perfect for, but I'm just too biased towards my cool looking swords, man. There's one final weapon type, and one that I feel is really quite underrated, the combat bracers. I've always been the type to prefer really fast-paced, lighter weapons, even if they don't deal as much damage as the heavy hitters. And if you want that super punchy feeling, combo-heavy, up-close and personal approach, you will love the combat bracers. I just personally don't think that they have as much usability as swords or spears. If you're gonna go for a hands-on approach, make sure to set your second weapon set to some good old swords, so you can get the best of both worlds, as skipping out on these entirely is a major missed opportunity. All of this makes for a solid foundation for combat, but we still haven't finished looking at our toolkit. Arguably one of Automata's most important tools is your pod. Pods have multiple programs in which to provide a super heavy attack, which will have a variable cooldown timer depending on which one you choose. You can have something as simple as a giant laser beam, which is a very heavy hitter, but can only be used on one target. Multi-hit programs such as Mirage, which deliver a series of rapid-fire blade slashes, which is better in a pinched close combat scenario. Or you can go the defensive route with shield programs that'll either block either physical or projectile attacks. Choosing just one is tricky, and early on in the game I highly recommend switching between programs to find the best one for you, but thankfully for those looking to add a little more complexity, you can eventually find new pods across the map. Each one of these will also have their own special abilities and can be upgraded separately from just pod programs, and each one of those can be customized to your own personal preference. Having multiple pods all set up to your ideal layout with all combat bases covered and switching between them at will is one of the most satisfying things in Automata's combat. These heavy pod programs are fantastic, but when paired alongside a secondary light attack, such as a burst fire or consistent rapid fire laser, which while on its own doesn't do a ton of damage, when combined with all other aspects of combat in Automata, your pod becomes a true weapon of destruction and a force to be reckoned with. Our final member of the toolkit is plugin chips. As if Automata didn't have enough for you to manage already, one of the most intriguing parts of the whole game is chips. You have a choice of 3 main chip slots, allowing you to completely restructure 2B's internal functions. It's really impressive the level of customization that you have here, and in some truly unconventional ways too. You have a limited number of space in your chip slot, with a few spots taken up by 2B's default operating system parameters. Now, this is such a cool feature that leans perfectly into Automata's creativity and taking advantage of ludonarrative harmony. The game will actually let you remove elements of your HUD, such as your mini-map, enemies' health bars, save points, even your own health and skill gauges, in the interest of giving you more space for plugin chips. Now that's badass. These plugin chips must be important, you ask, and boy are they ever. These are really what make or break the game, as you can equip relatively tame enhancements, such as improving your crit rate by a few %, increasing overall health, attack, and reducing damage from different types of attacks, but also get some really almost honestly game-breaking stuff too, especially Deadly Heal, which when upgraded basically makes it so it's near impossible to die unless you play blindfolded, and even then, you might still breeze through. I recommend not using chips like this unless you get really stuck in a section, as it negates almost all challenge that Automata throws at you. On that same topic of challenge, however, to conclude this section of combat, I have one last thing to mention. Difficulty. On normal difficulty, Automata is just a little too easy for me. Being slightly underleveled doesn't even really make that much of a difference, it just means enemies take longer to kill. Normally, you would just toss the difficulty up to hard, but hard is hard. Now, of course, it's the hard difficulty. This should be expected. The issue is the gap between normal and hard is so vast, it's just begging for something to be right in there to fill that gap for a slightly more challenging experience, but one that isn't brutally punishing. You can make Automata harder for yourself by not using overpowered plugin chips and staying low level, but you'll miss out on so much of what the game has to offer. And again, like I said earlier, it only really just increases the time to kill rather than making the game any harder. While I can easily say that NieR Automata's combat is by far and away some of the most fun I've had in this game, it's certainly not without its flaws, but in all honesty, the sheer amount of fun you'll have more than outweighs its shortcomings. Tone is one of the most important building blocks destined to make a world feel authentic. If the setting of your game can't match the thematic design of the writing and story, it feels out of touch. The world of Automata is the perfect example of blending tone and atmosphere into the creation of a map and world to make it one of the main characters. While I will be diving deeper into this during the spoiler section of the story, each location and subsection of Automata's map are character-rich and have their own mood entirely. Even from the outset on the bunker, this is after all the hub for all Yorha units, alone from the desolate and empty Earth, and exiled from the humans that they have been sworn to protect on the moon. The station itself feels cold, empty, devoid of life even, and this tone is shown through elements such as how small and in a vacuum everything feels. The way the camera presents the station in this side-scrolling format to enhance this cramped feeling. This tone is told through multiple senses to really make sure that you understand. Through color palette choices, camera view, and perspective, and of course, musically. The Fortress of Lies is the title of the background music that plays in the bunker, and why I can't say why it's named that to avoid spoilers. For those who know, it adds another dimension to the already very fitting track. The Remains of Earth itself is host to so much more of Automata's beautiful characterizations. The main explorable basis, which I'm assuming is based off of a post-apocalyptic Tokyo, but correct me if I'm wrong, is this blend of natural beauty and disaster fused into this depressing but yet strangely enthralling wasteland. In a great contrast to the bunker, the wasteland of Earth is open, but almost too open. Of course, this is all intentional. Opposite sides of the isolationist point of view. It is so hard to get really in-depth about Automata's world without getting into spoilers, so I'll continue this discussion later on in the video. But for now, let's talk music. I am of the strong belief that music makes or breaks a video game. There is so much you can do through musical storytelling and using the mind's imagination to extrapolate. And it is absolutely essential that soundtracks aren't half-baked and instead filled with just as much passion as every other aspect of the game. NieR Automata has one of the greatest soundtracks in media. Period. What separates NieR's soundtracks from most others is the usage of vocals, and more specifically, language. Automata uses what has been coined chaos language, and yeah, it's just as wacky as the name would suggest. The composers based chaos language on the concept that if our languages had drifted away thousands of years into the future, this is what they would sound like. Some of the songs are English-based chaos language, some are French, Japanese, as well as others. Yes, they basically invented a unique dialect in which to use in the vocal tracks. Only Yoko Taro, man. The results of this speak for itself, and I'll let a few tracks play for you just to show off this genius. No, it's not just you I'm floating to. At the end of the day, you can engineer and write up the most intelligently composed piece of music out there, but that isn't what music is about. It's all about emotion, and even though you can't understand a word being said in most of these tracks, music is a language that needs no translation. It's one of the purest forms of expression, and something that everyone can understand. Something that is always tricky to introduce is Automata's story. This is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a traditional experience. The 26 different endings should give it away, though to the game's credit, 21 of them are jokes, such as eating a fish ending the world or removing your own operating system killing yourself. But I digress. NieR games are easily one of the most oddball and unique titles out there. There's simply nothing even in the realm of similarity to them, but that's what makes them such an amazing experience. Automata's story isn't start to finish. finish. The way I like to describe it is almost like a Russian doll. Your first layer is one story and point of view, and then once you're done, you remove that layer but keep it in the back of your mind and allow it to challenge your points of view as you tackle the next one, or retelling of that story. It's easy to misconceive Automata because of this mystique. For someone knowing nothing at all, they probably know that it just involves robots and androids and that 2B's hot, which, honestly, is my main issue with the game. Look, as a straight man with eyes, I can see that 2B is attractive, but when the general public knows of this game as the one with the big booty android woman, instead of it being one of the most revolutionary and thought-provoking games in the last 10-15 years, it really bothers me. Granted, it's an improvement over how Kaine was handled in the original NieR, but still enough to where a lot of character design choices feel forced to appeal to horny players instead of being tailored towards representing each android's character. Side tangent aside though, Automata is a challenge. It will test your comprehension of storytelling and force you to open your mind to some pretty abstract concepts. Your morals will be tested, your sanity will be questioned, but at the end of the day, there is not a single video game story that has even come close to the level of profundity that Automata has. And honestly, I don't know if there will be one that can. Automata works because it went all in. There is not a single element in this game that's not somehow dedicated to making you, the player, feel as involved in this world as possible. Everything has an explanation as to why it is how it is. Your loading screens are transmission spaces between consciousness. The world map is pixelated because it's a rough estimate from satellites in the sky. Your menus are just your characters going through their own operating system. Brightness settings adjust the optical sensors of each android. You get the point by now. Automata takes every possible chance to exploit the video game format in ludonarrative harmony. This story could not be told through another medium. You could take many of the greatest games of all time, and their stories could very easily be told just as, if not more effectively, through film, through an anime, a book even. But NieR stories, especially Automata, exploit the benefits and creative possibilities of video games instead of minimizing the drawbacks. If you haven't played Automata by now, and have even the slightest interest in doing so, do it. The rest of the video will be waiting for you when you come back, because it really is a case of the less you know, the better this game is for a first playthrough. Mild spoilers for themes and concepts discussed in Automata. You're going to be taking a serious look at many aspects of humanism. The game itself can seem quite nihilistic, as concepts of life itself and existence are heavily questioned, and if stories that get really dark interest you, this is absolutely the game for you. Sure, there is cute robots and attractive androids, but when this game gets dark, it might definitely be too much for some people. Is it a game worth experiencing? Absolutely, but only if you are 100% committed to the experience. Automata is not one of those games where you can play it casually and hop in every once in a while. This story requires those willing to learn, to challenge beliefs and what a video game can be. And if that's the mindset you go in with, you are going to have a hell of a journey through NieR Automata. The magic of this game is in that story, and with a full story spoiler warning ahead, I want to take you through NieR Automata's story and explain just why it clicks so well, and without further ado, let's dive on in.
Everything that lives is designed to end. We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death. Is this a curse? Or some kind of punishment? I often think about the god who blessed us with this cryptic puzzle, and wonder if we'll ever have the chance to kill him.
Well, I'm sure that won't be relevant now, will it? We start our journey as 2B, tasked with leading a Yorha squadron in the search of a mysterious Goliath-class enemy threat. This Goliath is in a seemingly abandoned and dilapidated industrial rig, and your first few minutes is all about getting you acclimatized to how 2B plays while in flight, all while watching every single one of your teammates get killed one by one, which is, yeah, very confidence-inspiring. 2B ventures through alone before crashing dramatically through a dead end, a quick way to get her out of the mech suit and onto her own 2 feet for a switch in perspective and an introduction to melee combat. First with some smaller fodder-type robots, moving your way on up to, oh, just bring the whole construction site, why don't ya? This all gets interrupted by another mech providing some assistance. Let's meet 9S. He's another member of Yorha, but unlike 2B, who's a dedicated combat unit, 9S is built for support and scouting. With 9S keeping an eye on us, 2B continues her search for the Goliath-class unit, as that arm from earlier was not the target. The factory is just a snippet of the post-apocalyptic world that remains after the war, and its presentation fits this beautifully. What was once a place that the humans worked, now overgrown with vegetation, machinery, piping, and equipment in ruins. The midsections of the factory is your playground to get used to tackling multiple forms of enemies and figuring out all of the ways that Automata messes with your camera and perspective. On the outside, however, 2B gets surprised by now 2 mechanical crane saws. It's a surprisingly short-lived fight, however, as shit, this ain't good. The first of Automata's many sub-bosses, but it isn't all that challenging of a fight, more just making sure you get the basics of dodging projectiles and waiting for the right time to get involved. That and, of course, fighting Goliath-sized robots is just badass. 9S swoops in to help us in the fight and hack into the Goliath systems, using its own weapons to shoot it down. These machines are no joke though, and the Goliath wakes up and takes one final sweeping blow at 9S, knocking him out. He's in too much of a state to patch himself up on the field, and 9S, being the twit he is, wants us to just leave him be. But with a little convincing, we manage to jack his whip and spin the block on the Goliath one final time, even hacking into its main frame and using its own arm to land a devastating blow. The Goliath is finally dead, and we can celebrate. You have got to be joking. 2B and 9S decide that this is simply just too much to deal with, and use an android's final last resort, the black box. The black box will store all contained memories of an android, and your command can use this data and transfer it into a new body. This isn't just something that's convenient in a story though. This even works in standard gameplay, as if you die in game, you truly do die. Your memories will get transferred to another android at the transport station, and if you want your old stuff, you're gonna have to go back to where you last died to pick it up. This is just another example of that brilliant ludonarrative harmony that Automata excels at. From the offset, the bunker feels discomforting. It's the only location that has a monochromatic color palette, and on first visits, no background music plays. Just you, a constant curving walkway, and your thoughts. You don't feel trapped, you feel alone and isolated, which, considering what'll get explained soon enough, is really very fitting. After exploring your surroundings a bit, we meet up with 9S and talk about data transfer. According to 9S himself, he doesn't remember anything about the black boxes. He assumes that the bandwidth at the factory was so low that only 2B's memory data could be transferred into a new body, hence leaving the 9S unit we see in front of us an entirely different android to the one we fought with at the bunker. The pair proceed to salute Yorha, but as 9S walks away, the camera focuses on 2B's hand, clenching violently into a fist. This is a very important subtle hint at something later on, but for now, just keep that scene in the back of your head. Time for a little backstory on the human-alien conflict from the past. In 5012 AD, the aliens from a world beyond the stars unleashed an attack on Earth, using machine life forms designed for weapons as their army. The humans that survived this attack fled to a new safe haven on the moon. In 5204 AD, the human population on the moon launched their counterattack on the machines through an army of androids. But after countless attacks, they still were unable to reclaim the Earth for themselves. This is what the Yorha Task Force was designed for. The most elite android forces yet. The final effort to break this stalemate once and for all. Most games will toss your brightness, audio settings, and all of that jazz right before you start the game, just to get it all over with. Automata is different. Throughout the whole opening mission, you're never going to get asked to do this. You can of course do it manually through the settings, so I just thought, okay, the game just doesn't want that intruding with the experience. That is until 9S, tasked with getting 2B back into proper spec after the black box transfer, puts you into the operating system of 2B herself to reconfigure all of this through the lens of reprogramming a robot. The whole thing is being recorded as well. Wonder what that could mean. A neat touch with this little segment is that it actually has multiple ways and it can end. If you do nothing at all, 2B will eventually wake up with some sort of a default setup profile, and if you take too long, 9S will run out of storage recording and you'll be forced to save what you have done and the rest will be set to default. Yeah, they really didn't hold back with even the smallest details in this game. After all of this is done, 9S explains how the commander has tasked him with monitoring and maintaining 2B. Of course, because 9S is new, he feels the need to explain all of this. But since 2B met 9S at the factory, she of course knows all of this already. Or is that really the reason? The pair still aren't exactly buddy-buddy just yet. 2B has an unknown grudge signified by that clenched fist, and the fact that she keeps asking him not to call her ma'am. Her hesitance to show any sort of emotion and stay stoic in nature. Despite 9S's unwavering partnership and clear interest in building some sort of a friendship, this all sounds normal for androids who really just met, but there are clear signs that there's something more going on behind the scenes, and I want you to keep 2B and 9S's relationship and mannerisms in the back of your head for the future. The two head to speak with the commander and are tasked with a mission. According to the commander, Yorha hasn't been able to keep in touch with one of the resistance camps down on Earth and wants us to go investigate. With our first mission set, it's time to head onto the Earth's surface and get this game really started. On the way there though, questions immediately come up through 9S. If this mission is all about reconnaissance, why would they send a combat model like 2B to head the mission? 9S, after all, is a scouter, so he's more than capable of handling the job on his own. 2B, though, without hesitation, accepts that orders are orders and obeys them, leaving a hesitant 9S to his own worries. Arriving on the Earth's surface, we get a much broader look at just the factory. Few buildings still stand, and those that do have major sections destroyed or missing entirely. Plant growth over the last 200-odd years has infested its way into this beautifully dystopian imagining of a ruined Tokyo. The song that plays throughout the city, Rays of Light, is at first quiet. The first few notes that play seem hollow, as if not to disturb the atmosphere and tension that the silent city gives off. And as you move throughout the city and start to find life, both natural and not, transitioning to a more optimistic tone, the machines on the Earth's surface initially seem very different to the ones found in the factory. They don't attack unless provoked, and 9S says they seem to just stare into space. The resistance camp is not far from our landing base, so picking up our mission, we go in search of the camp leader. The resistance camp is small, and may seem like an insignificant hub in our journey, but it's packed with character. Old Second World War trucks and rifles, and artifacts from pre-machine war times. Peaceful sleep, the music that plays at the camp puts you at ease. It's almost as if you're gathered around the fire with a bunch of musicians, those being the members of the camp. And then the second you go and visit the leader Anemone, vocals kick in on the track as well, signifying that guiding voice for the resistance members, feeding that already magnificent musical storytelling and personification of the world that Automata does so well. Anemone asks us to help a few of the resistance members as they seem to be having a few issues. The first of which is a supply trader who can sell plug-in chips and other value items to 2B if she gets him a few materials which he's missing. This seems at first just like a simple fetch quest, and in terms of the quest itself, it absolutely is. But what changed this quest, however, is the dialogue when you get back to the trader. He mentioned at the beginning that he had a bum leg, but didn't have the supplies to fix it. Upon quest completion, 2B offers to help get his leg fixed, but he denies. This left leg is the only part of his original body that still remains. All other parts have been replaced to a degree he can't even put an exact number on. So his question is, if he replaces the one part of him that's still original, would he even be himself anymore? If you've ever heard of the ship of Theseus, this is a very clear reference to that. And Automata loves tossing in little references to different philosophers and some of their thoughts throughout history. And you can see this through multiple NPCs throughout the world. The other quest that Anemone gets you to help with is for a weapons trader. He needs a few things in order to get his shop up and running. And once we get them for him, he has his own important moral dilemma, wondering if, because of his professions, because sure, he's giving weapons to help his friends, but at the same time, are those weapons also helping them die faster? The people of this village all have their own moral conflicts, and it's what elevates them from being more than just your standard NPCs or quest giver. They represent something far more important. Thankful for our kindness, Anemone brings up the main topic we came here to help with, and says that there are some machine life forms in the desert that have been acting quite strange lately. The transition to the desert is beautifully done. Through a collapsed subsection of buildings and voila, desert. The Council of Humanity has a message for us, with the announcement reminding us that there are hundreds of thousands of humans on the moon, begging to be let back onto their homeland, and making sure that we know how important of a mission this is. The desert, while not as complex and varied as the city in design, has a certain isolated from humanity natural charm to it, and is full of this cryptic beauty. The music in the desert progresses the same as in the city, starting more slow and methodical, mysterious even in its tone, setting the mood perfectly for our investigation. Apart from being visually different from every other area, the slippery sand dunes provide a new dynamic in which to aid both combat and traversal. The machines in the desert are also very different to the city. They wear clothing which is supposed to imitate humans, and have learned to speak some sort of basic language, and show signs of fear even? If you've played the original NieR, there's actually some really neat stuff about the desert. In one of the side quests here, it's actually revealed that this is where Facade stood in the original game, and the way that the robots dress and speak are in line with what the people and king of Facade were like. Diving deeper into the desert though, we find a robot who pops up and continues this pattern of strange behavior, asking us not to follow him in this barren robotic form. So of course we're gonna follow him. We approach the abandoned ruins which used to hold housing for the humans pre-war. The contrast from the city ruins here is excellent. The buildings are both in ruins, sure, but there's no vegetation and almost no color to be seen. It's more creepy, unsettling. As you know, this is once where people came home, lived their lives, where families lived in peace. And what makes the whole area even worse is what you find just down the path. Tracks of deceased and mutilated android bodies lay here. What on earth happened here? As we continue to follow this machine, our path falls into this giant pit. What we see next is, it's a bit hard to ignore. There's a machine holding a stroller and protecting it with its own life, alongside a group of robots who, let's just say, were a little too inspired by Careless Whisper. The main machine that we were following orders the others to attack. It's a short fight, but once it's over, the machines start acting even stranger and start combining into one giant structure, birthing or summoning this humanoid machine. The fight with this machine itself is great. Some great variations in fight structure and some banger music, before the machine splits and carries itself away to definitely not be seen ever again. After a dramatic escape from the collapsing cavern, we contact Command and give them a status report and head back to Anemone, who thanks us for our help and offers us a room to stay in. Once we've rested up, the commander forwards us a message stating that black boxes of surviving your androids were found and wants us to investigate. The black box signals lead us to the amusement park, which is easily my favorite location in the game. From the offset, it is just jaw-droppingly pretty. The almost fairy tale-like aesthetic mixed with firework and balloons giving life to the air. Having most of the world be so devoid of life and character makes the amusement park so powerful, while the visuals of an abandoned and desolate theme park is haunting. The main castle being that shining source of life eases that tension. And then there's the music. Amusement Park is easily one of the most beautiful pieces of music in video game history. Violin strings and percussion through xylophones tease your ears before the vocals swell, amalgamating in this masterful bit of music. All of this just for an area theme. Look, I know I'm gushing a bit, but when something stands out and sticks with me this much, I can't not point it out. It's why I love video games. The machines in this area are more like the city ruins. Most will not attack unless provoked, almost as if they're hypnotized by the amusement park's sheer joy and presence. Traversing the amusement park will take you through ruined corridors, dysfunctional park rides, and tanks? Defeating the tank results in our pair finding a machine core, which I notice it's similar in structure to a plant cell even. Without dwelling on this for too long, we continue our trek through the park, riding the one ride which is still functional, a roller coaster. If you needed a visual showcase of why I love this section so much, it's the roller coaster ride. The intensity of the music, the beautiful cinematography of the amusement park itself is just wonderful. On the ride itself, 9S tries to ease the relationship between the two of them by suggesting that the beings he's closest and most comfortable with call him Nines, and he hints to 2B that he wants something less tense between the two. 2B though holds that strong front, of course to protect her stoic front, or is that really it? It's definitely clear that there's something more between the two, but we just don't know yet. The ride takes us into this amphitheater, where we meet this jarringly designed machine lifeform. It's propelled by rockets and takes the form of some sort of an opera singer, decorated with what seem to be corpses of androids. I love this boss, and I'll explain why in the later section of the video, but something that I always appreciate about this boss is that their attacks line up perfectly with the theme in the background, which is fitting for how well composed this section of the game is and her opera singer physique. Partway through the fight, we get this total switch when we transition into some sort of a bullet hell minigame. These have their own redoing of the game's current music in the background as well, just redone in an 8-bit style, which I am a total sucker for. So that minigame was apparently the boss trying to hack us. Things seem grim, and they get even grimmer with the boss chanting about how they must become beautiful, and summoning possessed androids on stakes, which gets even more messed up when it's realized that these are the androids that the black box signals are coming from. Upon defeat, this game goes into this mysterious cutscene. The boss we just faced in love with another machine? That seems a bit odd. Unfortunately, the androids were only being kept alive by the energy of the boss, so their black box signals are now officially offline. NieR brings up conversation about how the machines they've seen so far, and especially the machine that they just fought, seem to be showing signs of emotion, which is really quite surprising as these were supposed to be killing machines, designed to do nothing more than wipe out humanity. NieR is really quite intrigued by this, but 2B continues to hold a firm, unyielding front and will not look at anything apart from our mission. On that same topic of machines not being as expected, one meets us outside of the castle gates and invites us to follow him to his village. On the way there, NieR notes that he sees rockets sending supplies up to the moon, where the remains of the humans reside. This is a seemingly unimportant little detail, but let's not forget about this. Keep it in the back of your mind. Upon arrival, things are different. The machines here don't show any signs of hostility at all, waving white flags in unison, and there is zero reason to believe that this is nothing but a friendly and welcoming community. Cool, earthy tones and relaxing, easing strings play through the music to reaffirm this message of peace. Their leader, Pascal, is also very different to any machine we've met so far. He's well versed in language, kind, and welcoming with open arms. He asks that we take a fuel filter back to Anemone, as his village is actually on good terms with the human resistance camp. A definite change so far because machines and humans definitely have this conflict, so it's interesting to see such a strong bond between a machine and the resistance camp. We of course help out Pascal, but suddenly a large explosion in the distance is heard. A Goliath-class lifeform just like the one from the factory ruins has struck an attack in this city. On the way there, the game's tone is really starting to shift dramatically. Things were just starting to become more hopeful, cheerful even, and spending time in all these colorful areas. Just to transition back to the city that we know, but in a completely different light. The color is zapped away, the animals run wild, and flame embers coat the sky. The actual Goliath fight is pretty similar to what we've experienced in the opening factory mission, but again, that doesn't change the sheer badassery of it. This all culminates in a massive section of the city ruins caving in, revealing a really quite shocking twist. A signal from the aliens who haven't revealed themselves for hundreds of years has been detected underneath the city. This of course is a surprising thing for just 2B and NieR to discover. I love the fact that after this Goliath invasion, the city ruins are permanently scarred. This is a really solid chunk of the map, which is forever changed for the rest of the game. Buildings collapsed, sections of overgrowth that seemed like fields all burned away or caved in. The remains of that Goliath stands as if to serve as a trophy of the war. The city went from being so vibrant, full of color and some semblance of life, complementing our journey so far, and that mysterious beauty is now replaced with newfound dread. It's intriguing, but for all of the wrong reasons. The large cave-in at the center of it all exposed the city's inner workings and piping, along with a strange network of tunnels. They seem to have been used many a time before, with machine corpses nearing the end, and even some form of stairs? Going through these strange doors leads us to one of the strangest locations yet. A clearly very highly advanced space-age exhibit of sorts. We find corpses of what seem to be alien life forms and destroyed motherships, the aliens that we have been hearing about throughout this whole game. have been long dead. This is our first major twist in the game, as how could Yorha not already know about this? Especially considering this must have happened eons ago. How is it even possible that this isn't well known? The life forms from the desert earlier arrive, stating that this is the graveyard of their creators. They're different than last time. They have clothing, tattoos, Yas Queen nails. The short-haired one, Adam, drops the bombshell on us that the machines took and killed the aliens who created them. Through a spot of beat the shit out of androids and tell, Adam explains that the machines are capable of learning and evolving, that they can become aware and sentient, more than just weapons designed to kill, and that eventually they seemingly became so intelligent that they surpassed their creators, leading in their eventual destruction. The machines have always been perplexed by their creators' behavior. They seemed simple compared to the weapons they created for war, but the humans, they were fascinating. The humans' way of life, the duality of humans killing unbelievable amounts of each other, and at the same time, having a strong love to balance out the scales. The machines hosted by Adam and Eve dedicated themselves to unraveling this puzzle of humanity and what it all means, and want our help to find the ones on the moon to continue their research. In the end, the androids were created as a form of human replicants, at least visually. NieR, due to being sworn into Yorha, can't comprehend how bonkers Adam and Eve's speech is. So the whole talking thing is done, and all it is kill. The duo leave us with some strong final words, saying that time is running short and they wish that we don't end up with the same fate as their creators. We head back to the bunker to report to command about this seemingly shocking discovery, but the commander is unfazed by this information. She also says that the Council of Humanity needs time to sort this out, and wants us to investigate Pascal in the meantime, as the Council demands it vitally important. This is, of course, strange. She seems to not care much about this seriously world-breaking news, and now wants us to investigate Pascal of all things, the machine in which is known the Resistance is on good terms with. Something is clearly very fishy here. Pascal severely understates the siege on the city ruins by calling it a bit of a ruckus, which I find endlessly funny every time I hear it. Talking to Pascal leaves us with some important pieces of information. The aliens, of course, haven't been in contact with them for hundreds of years. They left the machines to live on their own, and in this time, Pascal saw countless friends passed away, and this scarred him not because of the death, but because he had become so used to seeing the ones he cares about die. It's interesting to see such complex emotions from a machine that was supposed to be designed to kill everyone, now is it? He also mentions that there are a bunch of off-the-network machines and something about a forest kingdom? A kingdom of machines? That's immediately off-putting. Our next target is to investigate the kingdom for ourselves and see just what exactly is happening. A little slice of conversation between the two of us emerges up once again. NieR really wants to try and open up to 2B more, and spend this depressing time during missions with a sense of ease between the two. And 2B, being her usual self, reminds him that Yorha aren't allowed to be emotional. God, these little sections hit so much harder once you know. Right at the entrance to the forest kingdom, we approach the absolutely gorgeous, desolate, and ruined remains of what looks to be a shopping mall. This is, apart from the amusement park, one of my favorite locations in the game actually, even though you barely spend any time here. Something about these light rays coating this waterfall-infested remains of a normally prim and proper mall is fascinating to me. We get ambushed by a group of machines while checking out this area, and oh, well, hello there. When I first played Automata, I had not played the original NieR before, so seeing Emil here meant nothing. But after playing it and revisiting this game, it is such a cool touch. But his goofy eye bolts off and opens the lock gate for us. How convenient. The Forest Kingdom is a bit of a change from other locations. While just like every other location in the game, it's great to look at, with the dense forest hiding that dilapidated castle in the back, I personally just don't enjoy it as much as the others. And continuing that thought of change, it's the first spot where, as soon as you arrive, it's very confrontational. The machines attack without 2B and NieR even approaching them. They wear armor and are equipped with weapons. It's an all-out attack, and they call us intruders almost as if they have something to protect. We approach the castle in the distance, and things get a little sideways. And of course, I mean the camera. It's been a while since Automata messed with the camera, but this technique makes the castle feel like much more of an experience than if it stayed in a traditional camera. There's a moment early on where, in the heat of the action, 2B slips up and almost calls 9S nines. What a cute and wholesome moment. I sure hope this won't turn dark after learning future events. No, it's just cute. The castle is quite short-lived, and we get ever closer to finding what exactly these forest machines were protecting. And at the top we see a child? This child is their king? Well, the shock doesn't last long before it gets turned into a kebab skewer. The mysterious skewer killer turns around to face the both of us, and this fight is an interesting change of pace. Throughout the game, most enemies have been slower than 2B. Makes sense considering how fast-paced our playstyle is. So to have this person who is faster than us is an interesting change. 9S notices that she's a Yorha type android and is wanted for annihilation by command. But why would a Yorha android possibly be attacking us? The android known as A2, in a very edgelord manner, tells us that command is the one that betrayed us, not her. We contact our operator who tells us that A2 deserted the Yorha forces, but they won't tell us exactly why. So we head on down to Pascal again to see if he knows anything. After a quick data transfer, Pascal states that while she does exist in their database, A2 has never come to their village, so he can't personally say that much on her. On the way back to the resistance camp, things are slowly but surely warming up between 2B and 9S, with her questioning the validity of asking Pascal, but at the same time complimenting 9S's curiosity in the most 2B way imaginable. After arriving back at the bunker, the main quest of Automata becomes a bit fuzzy, and it's my only real criticism of this game's timeline, but in all honesty, it gets some solid world building and character introduction, so it's more of just a personal nitpick than anything. However, the pattern continues by helping Anemone with another request. She asks that 2B and 9S provide backup support for a resupply mission out by the coast. The flooded city is easily in my top 3 spots of Automata. The dark blue sky shades the entrance in this dark and drab yet entrancing atmosphere, and mounting the hill atop the entrance, we get a different glimpse of how ruined this planet really is. The entirety of a city is submersed in the ocean, a network of freeways, hundreds of buildings, thousands of people once stood here, yet what remains is hardly even a shadow of that. En route to the missile launcher, the carrier ship that we were assigned to protect comes under attack, and as we glide along the sea towards the carrier ship, begin a fantastic aerial segment which shows off Automata's fantastic background imagery. The carrier is host to an intense battle between smaller flying units as well as larger warships, and the threat seems to be eliminated before this goddamn thing shows up. The massive machine adds another level to this already phenomenal action sequence, and really makes you feel at war. It's one of my favorite non-traditional segments of Automata. Even with a hell of a powerful satellite strike, the beast just will not go down. Another Yorha squadron makes contact and tells us to go on our own path and hit it with a giant missile launcher from earlier. This is easily one of the most badass parts of the game. The beast finally shows some sign of weakness before going psych, we still good. 9S and 2B split up alongside Pascal to finally take this monster down by attacking the last group of EMPs on its back, keeping its shield up. The intensity is higher than ever, with some of the most powerful and heroic battle music you've ever heard. And with the last EMPs down, one last final missile strike seals the deal on the Goliath lifeform. This right here is one of those moments you just sit and stare. Just the remains of the beast, the sound of the ocean, and space to contemplate your thoughts. It's easily one of those moments when you're playing a big game like this for the first time, and you just go, yeah, this game's good. Though sitting here for too long isn't ideal, as we still don't know where 9S is. As comms got knocked out for hours after the EMP strike, Command couldn't look for him until this very moment. However, according to our operator, Yorha has prioritized searching for guaranteed survivor, so it's up to 2B to look for 9S herself, and we need a scanning pod in order to do so. There's a set of twins at the resistance camp who might be, just a little familiar for those who know, who have exactly what we're looking for. One of the androids at the flooded city says that she saw a 9S flying away in his explosion, and has a slight estimate for his target landing. As you get closer, the reading seems to be coming from the cave network in the middle of the crater, where you'll find a hidden elevator leading you to one of the most strange locations in Automata. the copied city composed of crystallized silicon and carbon. This glacier white, almost Victorian-era style city is beautiful. It's fantastical in design, but not just visually. The copied city's theme just scratches that itch with a much lighter and softer tone than most songs in the game, and that piano in the background is heavenly. What isn't, though, is the corpses that decorate the land. A little further in, and we meet up with Adam. He copied this city from human records in order to understand their way of life better, all in his quest of understanding the beings that intrigue him so heavily. After a solid boss fight, Adam reveals 9S, impaled inside one of the copied city's walls. Fueled by 2B's emotion and hate, his final phase opens up after this, which has one of the best boss themes in the game. It is phenomenal. 2B takes a lesson from A2 when it comes to skewering, and hits Adam with it, and takes 9S home in the most touching display of care she's shown so far. We wake up at the resistance camp, and after a quick email from command, we speak with Pascal, who needs our help at the abandoned factory. He's meeting a group of machines off the network who want to form some sort of a peace treaty. We accompany Pascal to this meeting of peace. However, the machines start hitting the gritty and start worshipping their god Soldier Boy. After a quick fight with the brainwashed machines, we meet 9S? What happened to you, bro? No time to question it though, we gotta get out of here. We get a different and more grand view of the factory's scope than ever before during our escape, and some good side-scrolling action and equal amounts of both dead machines and become as gods. Near the end of our escape, we encounter another Goliath. Not quite on the size of the last, but it still hits hard. 9S hacks into the machine to destroy it, and 2B delivers a few signature slices to seal the deal. The machines that inhabit the top of the factory are really quite interesting. They're worshipping their god and murdering everything in sight. It's a horrible showcase of what being cut off from the machine network does to them. These machines feel purposeless and useless, and to them the only way out and ray of hope is to kill themselves in hopes of becoming gods. After all, they're machines who don't understand death and what it brings, so why would that not work? Eve himself is shown to be horribly struggling with the concept of loss, as he just experienced it firsthand now with his brother. The only thing driving him is straight vengeance and rage. Anemone calls 2B and exclaims that the resistance camp is under attack now as well. And on the way there, we see the scope of the machine's destruction. The city ruined is packed with nothing but machines destined to kill. And this certainly doesn't stop at the resistance camp. It's all out destruction. The machines' faces are broken. The only thing they care about is killing. Even outside the camp, another Goliath ball. Now, I don't know why, but on my first playthrough, this boss was a living nightmare for me. Which is funny because on repeat playthroughs, I breezed through this one. It isn't that bad of a boss in actuality, I just sucked on my first playthrough. Partway through the fight, 9S shows up, and not a machine this time. And it looks like Eve is the one piloting this Goliath. Things are looking a bit grim, especially for Pascal, as the robots were en route to attack his village. After fighting off a few machines, Eve contacts us directly through our comms. It's time to face him head on at the center of it all. Eve is truly demolished by the death of his brother. The sheer desperation and depravity that has overtaken him is showcased incredibly well. The dark side of his body oozing over and taking over, with the blood-red tears flowing from his eyes, is that perfect external showcase of his internal destruction. The boss fight itself is fantastic, with different phases challenging multiple aspects of your playstyle, and you better make sure you're good at dodging, cause you're gonna need it. Finally, Eve, after experiencing the grief that humans go through and suffering, gets a taste of another human reality. Death. Everything seems at peace, until this goober has to go and reveal he's possessed to us. 9S offers to upload his data to the bunker, but just like at the start of the game, that means his memories of who he is would be erased. He asks that 2B take his life. This scene is such an emotional gut punch. 2B is the one who's never shown any sort of emotion or care for 9S. When she finally opens up herself, it all gets forcefully ripped away. Her tears land on 9S's body as she holds him close and says something very strange. It always ends like this. On first playthrough, this is already an emotional scene, but as we'll understand soon enough, it somehow manages to break you even more once 2B's final words finally have context. With 9S still in her hands, 2B notices one last machine flashing with life, and in one last angry effort goes to slay it, but is stopped. Every machine across the land suddenly flashes with life. before a giant unit wakes up. But hey, that voice is familiar. Yep, that's 9S. His consciousness transferred through the surrounding machines, eventually transpiring in him taking over this unit. As the two reunite, the important question gets dropped. What is it that separates machines from androids like them? Humanity, emotions, and life is clearly present in both. And with that, one of the most beautiful final credit songs, The Weight of the World, serenades us, the player. It's really hard to pick a favorite song in a game like this, but just listening to the lyrics and vocals of Weight of the World makes it near impossible not to choose it. One of the most powerful songs in video game history. Man, it'd be really crazy if there was multiple variants. What a beautiful ending. But there still seems to be questions left unanswered. Characters almost seem incomplete. It's as if we aren't actually done the game. Ah, I see. NieR Automata handles storytelling very differently, as I've mentioned before. Your first playthrough was focused on setting the baseline for the world and characters in the world of Automata. It's already a great story with some pretty important philosophical themes and debates, but there's clearly context missing for certain scenarios and characters who haven't quite been explored to their furthest potential. That is what Route B is for. Route B follows the same short story as the first route, but shortens the fluff and changes your viewpoints and thought process on events that transpired, sometimes to a radical degree. All of this is shown through the lens of 9S instead of 2B as well. And it isn't just a different story experience, but gameplay as well. 9S is nowhere near as combatically adept as 2B, as he's a scanner. So there is a slight added challenge when it comes to slower movement and weaker weapons. But 9S also gains the ability to hack enemies, significantly reducing their health bar if you complete the minigame on time. The integration of hacking is done very well. Gameplay, music, all transition perfectly, and it doesn't feel intrusive or jarring in the slightest. And it makes the second playthrough very interesting from a gameplay perspective rather than having you play as this exact same character and playstyle again, such as in the original NieR. Route B may be much shorter, but it is absolutely worth analyzing. So without further ado, let's start 9S's story. In a very stark contrast to the dramatic and action-focused introduction that Route A chose, Route B immediately takes a much slower and personal approach, starting as a small machine? The machine is distraught at what looks to be an older machine, in which the smaller one calls brother. We search for oil in the hopes of helping the big brother get better, but unknown to the small machine, his brother is dead, and he can't understand the concept of that. As we saw at the end of Route A, death is something that machines simply cannot comprehend or understand. So for our small machine friend, feeding his big brother oil would potentially bring him back to life, would it not? This scene would be meaningless if we didn't have Route A's context and behavior on the machine's mindset and behaviors towards each other. The first of many examples of using multiple playthroughs to strengthen the story. 9S watches over these two machines, admiring the effort, but knowing that nothing will come from the young machine's efforts. This takes place just before he assists 2B with that giant saw mini-boss, and transitions into an infiltration scouting mission in where 9S preps for the Yorha attack squadron's approach on the factory. Just like when 2B's introduction taught you valuable techniques regarding aerial and physical combat, 9S's introduction mirrors this with plenty of hacking tutorials to make sure you really do get the importance of using his hacking ability. Eventually, we catch up with our heroine, and things feel like it was almost destined to have 9S as the protagonist. Camera angles are different, UI changes, and character prioritization switches as if he was always the lead. The story proceeds like before, with 9S scouting the path ahead in search of the Goliath from the beginning. We meet 2B again, midway through the game's first real boss fight, hacking its body instead of meleeing his arms like before. And something else that's a really neat touch, the names of enemies now show, while in Route A they would be illegible. 9S, after all, is an intel gatherer and scouter, so he would be able to sneak this information out through scanning targets. Unlike 2B, this doesn't overstay its welcome, as after 9S gets knocked out, we take control of his inner operating system, slowly reactivating all of his critical functions, taking active part in gaining 9S's hearing and vision back. He wakes up on top of the Goliath, and something very important to note after playing the first route, 2B showed zero sympathy for her squad mates who got blasted out of the sky just minutes ago, and here she is, clearly distressed that 9S is hurting even though they just met. Add that to the list of 2B's strange behavior for later, and trust me, It'll all make sense soon enough. She leaves and we get a different perspective on what happens when 2B leaves him to fight the Goliath herself. It's changes like this that make playing through a story a second time feel different enough to a level where it's still engaging, even though you already know the gist of what's going to happen already. The black box activation proceeds the exact same as it did in Route A, but it's what happens next that really impressed me. You meet 2B in her room and help her reboot like before, but this time from a whole new lens. If you noticed during that first one, there was that little recording that appeared on screen during 2B's reboot. This was not there for no reason, as guess what plays when you access 2B's internals? Yup, your exact recording from before. This will never be the same for any two people playing Automata, and while it doesn't affect much, you have to admit, that's just plain cool, man. After getting your initial mission from the commander, things are going to be identical as Route A until we get to the desert, and the game respects your time by cutting out a lot of the extra fluff, letting you access to transporters right away, and doing away with the same tutorials. Once you get partway through the desert though, approaching the apartment complex, your first real change will show up. A short cutscene plays showing some sort of a god being birthed from a volcano, and stating human emotions and thoughts to its subject, seemingly in some sort of a way showcasing or recounting the meaning of life. This is a bit strange and sudden. I wonder if we're going to get more of these and get an explanation as to what exactly they mean. Everything from our amorously adventurous machines to the first meeting with Adam is as it was in Route A, and even up to the amusement park, things are identical until we climb the ladder approaching the park entrance, where we get a conversation from the pods assigned to 2B and 9S. They reach an agreement about sharing combat data, which is something that's gonna play in line way later in the story, but just make sure you keep note that this is happening throughout the game. Another one of these comic-like cutscenes plays just after this, even more cryptic than the first one. From what I can gather, my guess is that this one is directed towards demonstrating the machine's ability to treasure something. No matter what the form, the emphasis on shape is what leads me to this. Whether it be another machine, an object, or even a feeling, the machines have grown to learn what exactly it is to value something. It all fits in though with how the machines in the amusement park speak, with cries about being together, which with the context of the entirety of Route A and these comic cutscenes so far regarding emotions, it all really starts to make sense. And this is the real purpose of Route B, at least in this first half. Taking sections you've already played and giving you an entirely new perspective on scenarios that you thought you knew. And one of my favorite examples of this is Simone, who, thanks to the scanning talent of 9S, not only has a name now, but thanks to 9S's full hacking ability, he gets a better look than ever at the machine's true backstory. We only saw a glimpse during Route A, but now we see that Simone was in an intense pursuit of love, and did outlandish things all in the pursuit of gaining love from a machine that she fell in love with. She tried different clothes, changed the way she walked, all in an infantile and shallow version of beauty that she learned from the remains of what the humans and what other machines around her extrapolated from those teachings. She searched for treasured jewels in pursuit of beauty. She consumed the bodies of androids in the pursuit of beauty, the bodies of which she used as the weapons we fought. The song that we hear during battle is the result of being told that song is another form of beauty. After everything, the machine she fell in love with still won't look her way. She failed to grasp the true meaning of love and beauty. Simone is a perfect extrapolation from that opening comic. What she treasured most was love, but she just didn't comprehend the true scope of it. It's clear that some of it is there, such as when 2B and 9S show each other a form of affection. It's evident through her reaction. The concept of love is there, it's just so clouded from the misguided teachings from humans of old that she can't see the true beauty of what love actually is. You remember that little conversation 9S and 2B had during Route A right after this fight, where 9S was so adamant about these machines' emotions? Well, you certainly have context to why he said that now. You could have easily dismissed that small conversation during your first run-through, but in Route B, it's so strong that you just can't. And it's what honestly the most important thing Route B does for me. Take moments that you thought were just banter and add so much more complexity to them. It's a really underappreciated concept in the grand scheme of Automata, but one that truly makes the way that these stories are told incredibly well done and out of the box. Complexity and changing perspectives changes again with a new cutscene with Adam and Eve, showing a new side to Eve, especially that we didn't see during the first run. His innocence and curiosity almost like that of a child. And speaking of the two, After the first real fight with the pair, we get another storybook. Fittingly, right after Adam and Eve big talk, what it's like to take over and kill their creators. This one's the story of a machine that killed its father, its mother, murdered the people that created it. The machine is full of emotions. It feels the freedom and possibility that it gained freeing itself from its creators, but inside, also chained down by the weight of being alone. It makes sense looking at Adam and Eve especially, initially on Route A, pompous and proud of their creator's defeat, now in Route B seeing these other emotions to them, and through that facade they throw up. As we reach the Forest Kingdom in our second run, a series of flashback sequences start as we progress through the forest, with the first bringing us hundreds of years in the past. Wonder what kind of time frame that would make it. A large machine seems to be taking the role of a leader, a king you could say, and hosting a speech for his machine friends about forming some sort of a kingdom. They seem confused on the notion of a kingdom, and the leader equates it to a large home, with everyone living together as a family. A family with their close friends, for a simple-minded machine with no real knowledge of human concepts and ideologies. This is everything. The idea of just having family with the ones they love is so special to them, and it's important to take note of that. Fast forward a little over 100 years, and that same king is dead. These machines are devastated, and with the intentions of keeping some form of their king alive, place the king's memories into a child, who they will raise and protect as their new king. You see now why the machines in the Forest Kingdom were so hostile at first. The one thing that they value more than anything else is so important to them. It's their world, their treasure. The one motivation they have in life is to protect this king, and they so valiantly do so with their own lives, even if it means their death. The next sequence is just hours before our entrance to the Forest Kingdom. The remaining machines stand hopeless in front of their child king, frustrated that they can't bring him back to life. The machines, after all, still don't understand the concept of life and death. So for them, the desperation to keep their king alive led them to the child. And now that they see they cannot bring their king back, loss still remains. But they decide to push through and protect their king no matter what. They may have lost their king, but what they gained is faith, and that in itself is a beautiful thing. The confrontation with A2 with the Child King's resting place hurts more now, as you have all of that weight and guilt that you fought through these life forms that in all honesty just wanted to protect their one faith in life. And to conclude the Forest Kingdom segment, this is shown through yet another comic. They may not know why, but through the toughest times, the forest machines stood together, in community, in family, by each other's side, forever. The teachings of their king set them up to learn that through life. Yes, things will be hard, but you always have each other at the end of the day. While they don't know it yet, they finally understand what it means to be a family. Throughout the majority of the Oceanic Invasion, things are the same as Route A, but in all honesty, this section is great, so it didn't really need any real changes for the second run through. Though, when we reach the climax of the fight, we take the role of hacking the turret so 2B can take control, instead of firing it ourselves. Another change comes after getting wave-checked by Groon, where 9S takes full control of the final rocket. Route A made it seem as if 2B was carrying all of the weight during this fight, and honestly, throughout the whole game. But with examples such as 9S taking control of the rocket himself, and all of that intel on machines and enemies, you can see that 9S was just as important as 2B. His control over the rocket is even what caused him to go flying so far after that impact. He very clearly puts his whole life at risk, and you really couldn't see this until you see the game through his eyes. The next comic book presents itself right after the blast from Groon's defeat, showing what seems to be the creature itself. It was banished to the sea and rejected from everyone around it, even though it tried its absolute hardest to be loved by everyone. Due to what I'm going to assume is the machine's sheer size and violent tendencies, Groon was unwanted and abandoned by everyone, and even crying out to what would take the role of its mother. No one listened to its cries. These cut-ins aren't necessarily meant to make you feel bad for ending their lives, but more to show you that they had one to begin with. They aren't emotionless, killing machines. They've been through love, family, heartbreak, depression, and isolation, just as much as we have. 9S has been through a massive hit after the missile incident, and when we next awaken, it's inside his central control unit, as he seems to be almost discovering himself in his memories. Except, as he starts to awaken to his surroundings, it's clear that, in the incident, his consciousness got lost in a labyrinth of networks and ended up mixed in with one of the machine networks. The only thing that 9S is aware of is his name, and the fear that everything he once knew, his memories, his self, all could be forgotten. He awakens slowly but surely, remembering 2B, the bunker, the EMP blast, and realizes he must be in preservation mode. 9S decides to explore the networks out of curiosity, and in doing so, finds something truly intriguing. Data entries on human history, philosophy, social criticism, and even forms of governmental experiments. This should be really interesting to us, the player. The machines that we know as having a very infantile and basic understanding of human life clearly know a lot more than what we established. They never tried their own forms of life. They copied the humans' lifestyles to the finest detail, and when what they attempted failed, they tried the exact same thing over and over again ad nauseum, paralleling an almost exact replica of human behavior throughout history, in an endless cycle, you could say. The same cycle didn't apply to one thing though, however: combat, in which they showed a preposterous advancement in behavior and combat prowess. So why exactly did these machines insist so heavily on replicating the humanity that doomed itself to failure, unless the objective itself is failure? As 9S goes on searching, he hears the voice of someone familiar, Adam, preaching the so-called virtues of the machines he leads. How they have evolved, they learned war, they learned what it means to empower themselves over their creators. It's interesting. To Adam, the one thing that stands tall over everything else when it comes to humans is hatred and conflict, and he uses 9S's own anger to hammer in this way of thinking. To Adam, all who are gifted with life are slaves to what they desire most, and that is what gives their life meaning. To some, it may be beauty, to some, serenity, and to Adam, it's hatred. He forced this on 9S more, using his own thoughts, his lack of trust, his lack of hope, his interest in obtaining and learning everything, his want to be loved, and this final one. This one's interesting. He's thinking about how much he wants to blank to be. A 4-letter word, blanked out, but I'll explain what exactly that word is supposed to mean soon enough. Adam's words are visualized through another picture book. This one recounting the machines we've fought so far as examples of Adam's final words. The forest machine's treasured family, Simone's pursuit of beauty, and finally for Adam himself, the grossly captivating realm of hate. All of 9S's conversation with Adam took place during that boss fight in Route A, and while Adam's boss fight was great there, the added complexity to the machine's way of thinking make Adam's dialogue with 2B so much deeper, adding a little more of a sympathetic side to the fight, but not enough to replace Adam's clear misguided nature on what it means to live. In fact, life itself isn't something that he had the chance to understand, because the machines are all interconnected, giving themselves a form of immortality. He lived without the fear or concept of death. All he understood in life was hatred, killing, and death. That was life to him. He never got the chance to understand the concept of life and of existence. In his final moments, he finally gets a chance to see what life is like when he severs connections with the machine network and embraces death's cold, hard grasp. The story resumes back at the bunker, with 9S initiating his boot-up sequence after being reinstated at the bunker. While 2B goes off with Pascal to the factory, the real split between the pair gets some serious context to that gap in the timeline. While 9S is in the middle of syncing his data, an interruption happens, and he halts the data sync for both himself and 2B, and we take 9S's consciousness into the main Yorha server. Hacking into these servers lead us to some really strange, and honestly, disturbing discoveries. Those rocket shipments I asked you to remember early on from the way to Pascal's village were filled with near to nothing. Another server finds black box records deleted. Another server opens up, and 9S's pods firmly states that he really does not have access to this data and shouldn't look, but we curiously look anyways. This is the only server with some form of a defense system. This leads him to Council of Humanity and Yorha records, which imply that the Council of Humanity was formed by Yorha? That seems wildly contradictory, does it not? After all, it's been run into our heads at this point that Yorha was formed to protect the humans. So this information is quite concerning. NieR gets a support request from 2B, and without hesitation, we head to the main Yorha terminal. Tension is real. This section doesn't play any music. The sheer terror of what may happen next is enough to fill in any empty silence. Well, looks like we know how Robot 9S came to be in Route A. In seriousness though, it is pretty fun to play as the machines you're so used to fighting. They certainly do not control anything like our beloved 2B and 9S, but it's neat to experiment with all sorts of machines for a bit. Once we get the elevator open for 2B, it's time to head back into the main networks and open up an escape route for 2B. Though, as we go through, some really strange information is found. If you've played the original NieR, this won't be all that new to you. And spoiler alert if you plan on playing so. But we come across files detailing some sort of a disease and outbreak that was called white chlorination syndrome. Research on how to treat the condition has had no success, though in consequence of said research, a way of separating the human soul from the body was discovered and given the name Project Gestalt. Project Gestalt was used first on the sick and elderly for experimentation, much to the dismay of both researchers and the public alike. Reasonably so, even though this research could be monumental for the preservation of the human race, using those who are deemed weak to perform these experiments is still cruel and inhumane. A final report leaves us with an incredibly ominous name with the context of the project we know so far, the Replicant System. As we help 2B destroy that Goliath-class unit, the ominous words from the moon server are spoken once more, and 9S is summoned by command back at the bunker. The commander's words, while to those who have been paying attention and thinking, may not come as a surprise, never fail to land as a hard, heavy, brutal blow.
We installed the Council of Humanity's server on the surface of the moon.
But that means...
Mankind no longer exists.
Mankind does not exist. The humans never went to the moon. The only thing there is a small host of the human genome. The humans have been extinct since before the aliens attacked. This whole time, what have we been fighting for? 2B, 9S, fought valiantly and displayed nothing but loyalty to Yorha, all for a purpose that did not exist. The real reason the commander gives us for this, they needed a god worth dying for. She gives us the top secret document on Project Yorha and its existence. After the collapse of Project Gestalt, android morale was low after struggling and struggling for ways to revive the human race, and they lost hope. Command used the lunar server to send occasional dummy signals and created new androids who would never know about the extinction of the human race and live with the sole purpose of protecting a non-existent life form, all for the goal of never losing hope. Just imagine what it's like to be a Yorha android at this point. You thought you had a true purpose, to protect, to serve. Your life had honor to it. In reality, you were nothing. Your only point of existing is to give those more powerful than you motivation to live. Just how empty and useless you would feel. 9S wakes up and still can't come to terms with this fact. But what he does know is he has to tell 2B. Things are going to be relatively straightforward once we join 2B again, up until the final battle with Eve. His words before that battle hit a lot harder now. I know you two feel the same, that this world is utterly meaningless. If you were 9S feeling that, you get Eve's pain, as you know yourself what it means to have the one thing that matters to you taken away. For Eve, it was his brother. For 9S, it's his duty to protect humanity. We get an in to hack Eve in this run, and you can feel his pain more than ever. The music, even in this 8-bit form, is hauntingly somber, and paired alongside a wounded Eve cries for his brother, makes you feel evil. Reaching the end of the run, we see Eve's current thoughts. A home with the thing that he wants to protect most, his brother. This fight is fueled by his grief. The end is near identical to in Route A. 9S was still corrupted during his hacking of Eve, and 2B has to take his life. What's left of it anyways. But hey, wait a minute. You two weren't there before. It's still just as sad as the first time. Seeing 2B take his life never fails to choke me up no matter how many times I've seen this scene. The final words after 9S revives himself as a machine are different though. and implies that there's still more for the pair to experience. Well, color me interested. As credits roll, we get the privilege of listening to The Weight of the World, but this time we get the Japanese version, which is even more emotional than the English song. It's more depressing than the English one, and while both vocalists are extraordinarily talented, it's clear to me that Marina Kawano, the Japanese vocalist, really put every ounce of her soul into this performance. It sounds as if she's about to cry, and that's because she was. If you listen all the way through to the end, she really struggles to keep composure during the final moments of the song, and at the last word, she breaks down. I cannot listen to this version of the song without crying, and I didn't even understand the words. If you actually look at the lyrics for the Japanese version, it is so much darker than the English version, so I highly recommend doing so if you haven't. Even without the words, as I said earlier in the video, music is a language that needs no translation. Emotion is emotion, and The Weight of the World is my favorite example of this. While your eyes are still full of tears, these evil writers make you play through the credits and gather your things for battle. Routes A and B are both genuinely brilliant, and NieR Automata had me in its cold, dark, but ever so gripping narrative clasp. Yet, as I should have expected, the best was yet to come. Route C now expects us to have both a comprehensive understanding and differing perspectives for both characters and themes told throughout the first two runs, and uses that to fuel a new story, one that takes what you thought was emotional and shows you what it's like to be broken. It doesn't have that, oh, I've been there before, feeling that Route B had. All we know is that it's time for war, a war destined to wipe out the machines for good, a war for the glory of mankind, a war based on lies, a false motivator, but to us playing as 2B, a war that was all she was born for. As she blasts off in pursuit of Yorha's false destiny, we awaken as 9S as his instructor tells him to destroy the enemy defense systems, but in a very demeaning manner, as if he was a child or untrustworthy, constantly pestering him with how to do his job. 9S models are scanners. Their purpose is recon, and this is the exact type of job he was designed for. So why must she pester him in such a derogatory manner? When all the defense systems are down, it's time to head the charge as 2B. And on the way, hear a message that she would never think twice about. The Council of Humanity thanking the Yorha elite for the defeat of Adam and Eve. If you were 2B, this is nothing but a notice of gratitude for your hardships. But for someone such as 9S, a reminder of the lie that you're trapped in servitude of. The battlefield down on Earth is nothing short of spectacular. Not in a pleasant way, of course, but with the color nearly completely sapped out of the city ruins' charming tone. A symphony of destruction, and it makes for a hell of a stage to fight on, letting the sparks and projectiles of our battles speak for themselves. But the real star of the battle comes in shortly. After 2B gets hit by a sudden and strange new attack, we go through 9S's perspective for one of the most memorable gameplay sections in Automata. The machines activate a form of visual camouflage, and if you get hit by certain attacks, 9S will be corrupted and have visual, auditory, motor, and attack functions affected, and constant warning messages blocking your screen. After all, he is an android, and seeing what corruption does to him is insanity. It's hard to get more immersed than at this point in the game right here. The steep ramp up in difficulty for this section does everything to highlight the intensity of the situation and nothing to detract from it. A superb way to really put you in 9S's shoes as far as the realm of video game can. When we break through and free 2B from her ailment, the remainder of the Yorha force cackles in a terrifying fashion as they reveal what corruption did to their bodies and attack the both of us. After hacking through 2B's inner systems, allowing her to break protocol, preventing her from attacking fellow Yorha members, the challenge ramps up even more. Fighting androids who are basically as fast and powerful as you is a definite change from the machines, and requires your full attention to pull through. And it doesn't make it any easier hearing the cries of your teammates' death from your own hand. And the two decide to end their misery, destructing their black boxes and sending their data to the bunker just like we have before. When we reactivate inside the bunker, immediately we rush to the commander, who accuses us of contamination ourselves, but is forced to eat her own words as the Yorha units beside her turn berserk before her eyes. There's something I love about this sequence visually and thematically. The place that we grew to know as home, now having full context and a whole look towards its overly monochromatic feel now basked in blood-red light as sirens go off, and the words we used to hear as motivation through distorted, maniacal voices. The truth is known to us, and being as the one place the androids view as home, now exists as a fortress of lies. As we fight through hordes of our corrupt comrades, you may wonder, how is it that 2B and 9S are the only androids not affected by the virus? Well, remember at the end of Route B, as 9S was searching through the Yorha servers, he halted the data sync for both himself and 2B, meaning that whatever virus this is, it came from inside the bunker, inside of Yorha. As we reach the end of our battle, the expected comes true. The commander, of course, the head of the bunker, was synced up as well, and corruption takes over her body as well. Side note, I know it might seem silly, but I really wish there was a mini-boss fight against the commander here, not just because I adore this setting, but because at that point your anger towards the truth of Yorha would have been perfect fuel and motivation, but maybe that's a me thing. I also appreciate how the game shows 2B's distressed screams and anger at the destruction of Yorha's main base, but 9S, fittingly, doesn't care anymore. As we fly through to the Earth's surface, 2B takes over 9S's flight controls, sending him out of danger and handling all enemies by herself. Unfortunately, her attack functionality is disabled, and it just proves too much for her to handle. After crash landing near the flooded city, she composes herself, slowly using what energy she has left to run. But things are grim for our heroine. She was corrupted by the virus in the end, and we enter one of the most heartbreaking sequences in Automata. A virus-ridden, broken 2B, one who had just witnessed everything she stood for be blown to oblivion, wandering the remains of the city, looking for the one place she knows when the virus takes over, she'll cause as little harm to those around her as possible. It's hard not to be completely sucked in here. Everything is set to put you in 2B's position. Your vision, distorted. All sound, including music, now exists as a haunting backdrop for the inevitable. All of your UI, including the menus, now glitch. You are, after all, witnessing the internal destruction of an android, starting from its very core, which for us is the menus we witness. You're no longer playing NieR Automata. You are 2B, actively participating in her final moments. The closer you get to the end, the harder things get. The only thing you hear apart from constant static is the occasional distorted cry that you let out. Your sight is near impossible. And as we cross the bridge to the Forest Kingdom, nothing remains. No color, no sound, only the constant cutting voice of your pod. You finally reach 2B's final resting place and are ambushed by both Yorha androids and A2. 2B rips off her blindfold and plunges her sword into the ground. Her sword contains her memories, and she asks that A2 protect them and take care of the future. We commandeer 9S towards 2B's signal, but he could never imagine what he was about to see.
Nice.
Not only has he found out his entire purpose in life was a lie, been demeaned by the ones that he trusted, but now he sees the only soul that mattered to him stripped of life right before his eyes. Finally hearing 2B call him Nines as she slips off of A2's sword never fails to get me. I just wish that this scene was a little longer, as this is such a powerful moment, but it's very short-lived. Kinda like A2's long hair. Okay, fine, bad timing. After 2B's collapse, 9S charges at A2, the rogue android who, from his point of view, just murdered the woman that he loved, only to have the bridge collapse and something spectacular happens next. The real meat of Route C comes next, and we get the chance to play as A2 or 9S, as 2B's pod is now designated to serving A2. Awakening as A2 grants us with some sort of a bad memory, or flashback right before she wakes up to the sound of Pod 042. The two definitely don't get along well at first, due to A2's vicious hatred of machines, and of course, Yorha. But this bit of vitriol actually ends up working in their favor. Pod 042 just needs an objective, and A2 just wants to kill some fucking machines, man. 042 takes this as at least something, and has the signal for a big old Goliath in the desert to satisfy A2's craving. Playing as A2 is strange. She's a very early on prototype model, and we know that she very clearly has some bad blood with Yorha, which we'll find out soon later. But what we can get to is how she plays. A2, from a gameplay perspective, is nothing too crazy. After all, she is an out-of-service android that tends to be quite similar to 2B, so they for the most part are very similar. But she isn't without her own quirks. Most prominently being Berserk Mode. Berserk Mode allows A2 to turn into an absolute menace, consuming her own health when activated, but dealing out immense damage, and allowing her sprint to damage enemies if she runs into them. I personally found Berserk Mode to just be a bit too much, and played the game normally except for a few situations where it was useful. The most interesting thing about Berserk Mode to me is the lore. It was just so powerful and uncontrollable that it had to be discontinued for future models, tying in A2's gameplay and story wonderfully. There's some other goodies like how her sprint glows red, and taunt, which will bring enemies into an enraged state where they both deal and take much more damage. But the issue I have with A2's additions is usability. By this point, you probably should have some pretty crazy plug-in chips and weapons already, and due to difficulty issues I mentioned way earlier in the video, I found myself just not using a lot of these, as I didn't find a good flow or rhythm with them, but hey, maybe that's just a me thing. Back to our adventures with A2 and the Goliath. This fight will kick your ass if you're not ready. In fact, it's probably the one I remember being the hardest for my first Automata playthrough. There is just so much happening here that if you're not prepared, you're gonna die. A lot. There's a real new change after this fight though, when we get entered into a hacking space. This is the first time we do this as anyone other than 9S, and what we find inside seems to be a mixture of memories. A2 is finding memories from her past, fragments of 2B's data granted through her sword, and near the end, the Goliath unit she just slayed, begging for its mother, alongside a memory of 2B speaking to a memory of A2 herself about suffering alone and having no one hearing their cries. It's definitely clear that there is very much something more behind A2 and 2B's backstories, but again, we'll find out soon enough. When we return to 9S, we open our eyes to some very familiar faces. Devila and Popola have been taking care of him in the resistance camp for a few weeks. He's definitely not in 100% shape, seemingly doesn't remember 2B's death, and in a generally pretty lackadaisical mood. What's most interesting, of course, is the monolithic structure just outside. The tower. The tower itself is just stunning. Not only, of course, in size, but design as well. Full of intertwining fibers alongside sharp angles, and a strangely familiar color and material to the copied city. In order to gain access though, he has to shut down some resource recovery units located throughout the map. And on the way, we get some eerily similar dialogue to when A2 first awoke into Pod 042, with 9S having to state his objective, with that being to kill all machines. He's fueled by nothing but personal grief. There is no Yorha, no command, no 2B, no operator to guide him. A man with nothing left to live for, who took the one thing he had left away from him, lose the gift of life that he's learned so much about during our journey. It's important to remember that the pods assigned to both A2 and 9S are still in touch with each other, and may or may not have something for us in the future. Our first recovery unit is in the forest, covering the region in fog, called the Meat Box. It's made of a material not known to the machines, but it all feels very militant. And that's the theme for the gameplay in this one as well. Combat trials one after another, testing his skill, but also his mindset. The Meat Box is host to bringing out 9S's pure rage. There is no lighthearted 9S making witty comebacks. He is done with everything. Tunnel vision towards death all around him, even beginning to completely reject everything he's learned about machines, stating that they can't feel pain. 9S being so broken really just hurts inside. We know what he's saying isn't true, but his rage blinds him to the love and understanding his heart has learned throughout his time with 2B. This is proven once again at the top of the Meat Box. There's a machine core, one that we know is the equivalent to a heart at this point, that is host to collecting materials for the large White Tower's machine systems. The machine core cries out to 9S, begging not to take its life away, but 9S just sees red and takes the life away from the meat box. At this point, A2 is still wounded from the Goliath fight and heads to Anemone for help. But as we get to the resistance camp, there are machines fighting each other, and Pascal is there too. A2 and Pascal are total strangers, so this is the first time that the pair has met in person, and even though A2 swore to destroy all machines, for some reason hesitates with Pascal. Maybe a little 2B influence, you could say. Anemone and A2 go way back, and after some reminiscing and discussion about how 2B and A2 are quite alike, 2B's passing, and that 2B's memories reside inside A2 now, we head back to meet Pascal, where an understandably hesitant A2 has to learn to trust Pascal's word that the villagers are peaceful, and run about doing errands for Pascal. This section is a bit of a drag. It's not overly long, but we know that 2B's memories reside inside A2 now, so I feel that this really wasn't necessary for the story, spare for a few interesting conversations with individual machines. But this could have easily been side content in my eyes. It's important to note that the one thing the machines of Pascal's village recently learned from him was this form of fear. The machines are looking for weapons to defend themselves and keep themselves safe, something that we didn't see from the peaceful and cheerful villagers in both the first routes. Pascal taught them fear in the hopes of keeping what he loves most safe. His village was a place of peace, so they never had any reason to fear threat. But of course, due to recent happenings, it's understandable why Pascal would want to keep them safe. After our final task for Pascal, a nightmare strikes. Pascal's village is in ruins. Flames drench the peaceful community which we've grown to love. Cannibalism even running rampant. The machines have gone completely ballistic. It's really a depressing set piece. You just helped A2 build a rapport with these welcoming, peaceful machines, built them toys and slides, opened your heart to their kindness. For minutes later, the place you've grown to love ablaze. Pascal takes as many survivors as he can to the abandoned factory, while A2 defends what used to be the undefendable. Pascal is waiting for us at the factory, and some interesting conversations can be had. The villagers that were destroyed can't be brought back, even through another body. Unlike Yorha androids, of course, the machines hold all memory data in their cores, which is their self-consciousness. They're almost more human in this way. There's no second chance for them, and it makes aspects like 9S's newfound rage-induced killing spree so much more tragic. One of the coolest moments in this game comes shortly after this. When a large network of rogue machines attack the facility, we fight them off both on the ground and as Pascal, commandeering one of the factory Goliaths, swiping hordes of tanks and flyers out of the skies. This is the side of Pascal we've never seen. Violent, angry, and desperate to keep the ones he loves so much safe. It is a damn great section to look at, but man, does it ever play clunky. But to be fair, I wouldn't expect what must be a couple 100-ton Goliath to feel light on its feet. It is absolutely cruel to make you play as Pascal for the site just past the factory doors. The children who he raised, protected, cared for more than anything else, the ones that couldn't comprehend the concept of fear Pascal taught them, stabbing their own machine cores, killing themselves because it drove them into despair. Look, NieR games are going to be dark, but this hurt. Pascal's guilt would have to be absurd. He taught them what it is to fear, to be scared. He taught them to make weapons, not knowing that what his efforts to keep the one thing he cared for the most safe would be the thing that kills them. It is truly and utterly heart-shattering. Pascal leaves us with two choices: hack into his memories and delete them, or take his life, ending his mental torment. I understand why some would take his life, but I cannot bring myself to do it. Sure, you could end his suffering, but you also remove another chance at the thing that Pascal understands more than any other machine: the beauty of life. Hacking into his memories doesn't do your T-Rex any good, forcing you to shoot and destroy Pascal's sacred memories one by one. The scared children, the children's hopeful nature, his promise to play with them right before disaster struck, a promise he can now never uphold. A side note to this that makes this just so much worse. If you go back to the village to meet with him again, you'll find him clearing junk and offering to sell it to you, but when you look at what it is, I don't think tragic comes anywhere near close to how Pascal's story ended. There's a lot of really dark moments in this game, but Pascal's story is one that truly kills me. The kindest of hearts. A soul so full of optimism, care, and love. One who built a community based on peace. One who never did anything wrong. A soul who treasured the family he crafted more than anything else, and would do anything to protect, to fall victim to this cruel, unforgiving world where a simple lack of understanding caused his entire life to be ripped and destroyed right in front of his eyes. One of the saddest stories I have ever witnessed. Switching back to 9S's story here, he's still clearly destroyed while going through his search for the next 2 resource units, the next of which being in the flooded city, the Soul Box. This one isn't focused on combat like the first. The theme in this one is all about hacking. The minigames themselves are certainly a good ramp up in difficulty and provide a good challenge. But what's far more interesting about the Soul Box is the information we find around. Most notably being much more context on the tower itself. The tower has been gathering mass amounts of data from both machines and androids, but that's not the most interesting part. The tower itself is a massive cannon, which at this point we wonder, could this be pointed at the human server on the moon? My favorite twist piece of information in the Soul Box, though, is the note that is so confidential not even the commander knew about, is that the black boxes that all Yorha androids have been equipped with are made from the remains of machine cores. This is a damn evil twist. The Yorha androids were created for a lie and to be disposed of no matter what, so creating a whole new AI just to destroy them would be incredibly wasteful, hence the recycling of machine cores to do the trick. Starting to see why this is called the Soul Box now, aren't we? The top of the Soul Box is host to another machine core. Inside of this one, memories belonging to both himself and 2B. This is of course all presented to him by a machine, one that is seemingly to him, tormenting him. But in actuality, it's really just his own head. You know that 9S is so far gone when the one tormenting him mentally takes the form of his loved one who was just murdered before his eyes. His wrath letting loose on this 2B manifestation is so hard to watch. You know it's not real, but blood pouring from 2B's lifeless body as 9S screams in agonizing pain is really disturbing. Even the pods, who never really display much concern or emotion, are very worried about his state both mentally and physically, and he goes back to the only people that can help him, Devila and Popola. The final recovery unit takes its resting place in the amusement park. It's really eerie going back there now. All of the life and beauty has been sucked out of this once majestic and uplifting place. The song that I loved so much, now a somber, haunting vocal piece with no instrumentation to coat the backdrop of misery which is the remains of the amusement park. The machines here completely drained. They still don't attack, but this time because they simply don't have anything left in them to do so. The literal life is sucked out of them. Our final resource unit, this one called the God Box. Even 9S scoffs at the concept of machines having a god, which is so maddening. He has seen direct counter evidence to this. Every single time we see another chunk of 9S's journey with 2B discredited due to its rage, it's nothing but sadness. The God Box itself is nothing too new throughout its interior, more combat challenges and no real new information to study, but it's up at the top which is most important. 9S's own operator, Operator 210, she offered to become a combat unit during the evasion at the start of this route. Of course, the virus still remains with her. While we do get a fight here, I want to highlight the dialogue because I rarely ever see appreciation shown to Operator 210's character. This fight is of course hard for 9S. 210 was designed to guide and watch over him, and what she says during the battle destroys him emotionally even more. She goes over memories and emotions from previous lives and herself in the present day, the most prominent of which being her sense of loneliness. Remember when I said that 9S kept being treated like a child during Route C's introduction? Well, while we thought it was Yorha degrading 9S, in actuality, it was a corrupted Operator 210 who genuinely was speaking to 9S because she thought he was her own child. It's proven by her other remarks in this battle, where she so desperately needed to be affirmed. So when 9S kept blowing her off when she was talking to him as a child, it hurt her. She just wanted to be acknowledged. And then there's the reason why she chose to be a combat unit. This is initially unspecified, but we can gather from her way of speaking to 9S, and more than anything, this line here.
I wanted to be with NieR.
It's alright. It's alright. Because I'm going to kill you!
All she wanted was to be with him. This fight is so hard. Not difficulty-wise really, but you have to control NieR, who you can tell through his tears does not want to kill her, but his misguided motives still overcome him. Oh, and if you thought NieR didn't have enough on his plate already, he has to watch Operator 210 not die to his own hand, but to A2 right before him, and after another quick fight as A2, the ground below collapses. There's a really neat almost fourth wall break right after this, as our loading screen turns into some sort of a back door for communication for the pair of pods. There's endless touches that Automata has used to exploit the medium of video games for storytelling, and this is one that I love. The message here is something really quite beautiful. Pod 042 starts to question if these feelings of protection towards their designated androids is his will. After all, are pods capable of their own self-motivation? The two really are displaying more and more traditionally android or human characteristics as time goes on, even asking each other not to die. It's really an incredible thing. With all access keys granted, it's time for the siege on the tower. This is finally proper endgame now, and when Automata pulls out all of the stops, taking a game that is already great and cementing its place as a masterpiece. There's a section at the base of the tower with a bunch of hacking missions and a struggle with Devila and Popola, but I want to save talking about the twins for a section just after the story, so just hold in there a little longer. The tower is, at least to me, one of the most underappreciated set pieces in the entire game. This fusion between old human architecture and blocky cybernetic structures is such beautiful symbolism for this game as a whole. I even like to think that the chunks missing in staircases and sections of the map, and the convoluted and disorganized layout, is a physical manifestation of Adam's misunderstanding and incomplete mental image of the old human world. And the background music, as usual, grabs you by your soul and just holds it. Yet this mystical, ethereal place is home to the most torment NieR has yet to see, forced to be surrounded and attacked by 2B-type androids. His performance here is incredible. It's so hard to hear him screaming in pure agony that he wishes to kill 2B. These 2Bs are of course fakes created by the tower, but to a NieR this completely destroyed, does that even matter anymore? Playing as A2, we get a really neat touch for the OG NieR fans as she walks into the library from your village. The camera even moves like it did back in the original when you walk into a certain someone's office and other rooms, with a nice little twist on the music too. A2 says something that never fails to stick with me when she walks in. She asks what a library is, and with Pod 153 in a very robotic and matter-of-fact description just being a data storage facility, if it's ever lost on you just how out of touch human concepts are to the Yorha androids, here's your reminder. The library continues to throw back to the original NieR, with all sorts of human data and a certain someone you might recognize, and a book on Model 2 androids? Interesting. NieR, with an arm blown off due to the W2B, lays next to the corpse of one. Seeing him both use the arm of her lifeless body to give what little sanity he has left comfort, before ripping it off to replace his now missing arm, says everything about his current thoughts towards her. He still has memories, beautiful memories of her locked away that comfort him. But in the forefront of his brain, he's still furious, now using the one that he loves' own body as a weapon, going directly against what she would ever want. Remember those two red girls from the out of Route B? Well, they're back, and promise information. Information that is hard to hear. As he approaches them, they taunt him, calling him meaningless, his entire existence meaningless. We see why now. Yorha, of course, was just a fictional group of combat androids, destined to be destroyed once enough data was collected to help grow the machines. Once that goal was reached, destroy the bunker, destroy all remaining androids, but keep alive the lie that humans on the moon are still alive. So this begs the question now, is his existence really meaningless? I have an answer myself. But there's the rest of the tower to get through first, so stick with me here. The first fight back as A2, now fighting directly in the machine conscious, taking the form as the girls in red, is a fantastic fight, not just because of the visual trickery, but the commentary. The conscious is split into two sides, the sides of the alien and the machines, with the machine side spouting a lot about being the perfect, superior being. But as its arrogant and pompous way of speaking grows and grows, proves itself in direct opposing nature to the other side of consciousness, one that enjoys the android's evolutionary form of life, and the other that is horrified by it. This duality and conflict is very human-like in nature, is it not? I absolutely love the sequence right after this. A twin battle that takes place at the exact same time. A2 on the elevating platform and NieR flying his way to the top of the tower. It's all done basically through one camera shot and NieR seamlessly. You could be forgiven for thinking that it's the exact same fight. And in the end, it becomes exactly that, with Koshi and Roshi combining into a Goliath for one last shot. It's another example of character switching, but this time not quite as slick. Still provides for some pretty badass fight choreography though. However, the real showdown comes next. The two sides opposing each other, NieR's maniacal laughter, as A2 tells him about the destruction of the human race, never fails to escape me, but the real hard hitter is about to come.
To be hated to keep killing you. It caused her so much pain. The 9S type is a high-end model. They knew you'd discover the truth eventually, but the model designation 2B was just a cover. Official designation is 2E, number 2 type E. They were a special class of members designed to execute Yorha units.
It all makes sense now, doesn't it? Her cold grip at the start of the game. The desperation to save 9S when they first met at the war, despite not caring about other squad mates. The detonation of black boxes so frequently. The fact every time he came back, he didn't have his memories. Her stoic, unyielding front that she held. The refusal to become attached to 9S. What we thought was just the reality of a combat-focused model was a woman who hated the fact that her entire purpose was to kill him over and over and over. 2E. The Executioner. I want to bring you back to those infamous 4 asterisks real quick. This was left blanked out on purpose, and its intention was for each player to have their own meaning to it. It could be save, it could be help, it could be free, love, or it could be another side. It could be fuck, it could be hate, could be kill. How you view NieR Automata is what leads you to choose your own meaning to the phrase, as who knows, maybe the question isn't directed at 9S at all, it's directed at you. Yourself. At our final showdown, we have the choice leading us to 2 separate endings, either conclude route C or D. Since we're a little more focused on 9S at the moment, let's do his side first. The fight itself is full of the most intense 9S screams of agony and pain. Not physical, but screams of a soul longing for a lost purpose and belonging. No matter what he says about not caring, his heart remains. The pair end up tragically ending each other's lives. A2 goes quickly, and 9S poetically, slowly, and agonizingly passes due to the sword of 2B. And we see the remains of his memories through a data leak, taking the form of a text adventure. And it's a real challenge not to tear up as we go through his journey. He knows that 2B was destined to kill him over and over again. But he was so happy to be with someone. He had a family. His memory fades, but in the final wave of whatever life remains, sees the figure of the red girl from earlier. The tower was designed as a cannon to destroy the human server on the moon. But through watching the androids, Adam and Eve, their newfound meaning of existence, the girls were infatuated with this change of heart and growth and decided to use this cannon not as a weapon, but an ark that contains the memories of the machines we love, the machines that learned, the machines that lived. The ark may end up on the moon. It may wander the emptiness of space forever. The end result doesn't really matter. Adam and Eve reside in this ark, welcoming 9S with grace, asking him to join them. Does 9S hate them? Truly? Did he ever really hate them? 9S fades to where he cannot even remember his own name. The only thing he can say, "I'll go with you." And the ark leaves, with a purpose, concluding Route D. But hold on, we still have a 2 side to do. After making the choice to fight as A2, you get what I name the far cooler fight, simply because you can be hit by the same visual malfunctions as at the start of this route, even affecting the hacking space, which I have a total soft spot for. A very different conclusion though. The largest hacking space yet takes form. Just look at the damn scale here. It is really impressive. A2's final moments are far less grim and a lot shorter, destroying the network inside the tower and ascending 9S away with her pod that she's grown to love, looking out at the world and finally accepting just how beautiful everything is. And she accepts her fate and joins the souls on the Ark. She is with them all, no longer alone. As the credits fall once you've completed both endings, Route C and D, an interruption appears. Project Yorha is complete. The androids now wiped out completely and the cycle is doomed to repeat itself yet again, as it's up to the pods to delete all known data of Project Yorha. At this point, you're feeling completely empty. You watch these androids, machines, for roughly 30 hours, embark on probably the most humanist tale that I've seen, watch them learn what it is to truly live, and in the end, like all things, they come to an end. But hold that thought. The pods have been transmitting data throughout the game since the start of Route B, as I've mentioned a few times before. And one thing that they've learned is they don't want to accept this. And in a just perfect fourth wall transcension of media that would be basically impossible to pull off with any other game, you, yourself, are given a final choice. Do you wish for them to survive? If you accept, it's time for the true ending. Ending E. This is very different. Each other route has had previews in some manner to give you at least some form of an idea on what happens next, but not for ending E. This is, after all, no longer about 2B, 9S, and A2's decisions. This is all you, and you embrace this newfound resolution to the story through the sheer connection and passion that you have for these characters. You have to know what happens next. Whoever's idea it was to make you go through the hardest bullet hell sequence in the entire game while having tears in your eyes, you're evil, but I love you. Like, this is goddamn hard. But thankfully, you're not supposed to win this. At least, not alone. When you die, you'll get messages from other players actively encouraging you to push through. Yes, you, yourself. You'll be asked questions by the game itself. Do you want to give up? Is life itself meaningless? Are games silly little things? Eventually, you'll be given a final offer of help. This isn't just arbitrary. These are actual players who have completed the game before you, actively joining you in this unknown quest to save the ones that you care so deeply for. The music as well. God, if you thought the weight of the world hits hard normally, this is the version, man. It just is. Slowly adding in more and more tracks, and I absolutely adore this, but the entire development team as well joins in on the song too. You don't just have yourself, you have other players, you have the entire development team actively cheering you on. You may have the weight of the world on your shoulders, but it doesn't matter. You'll push through, and what we get is very, very special. 2B's opening line for the game, recounted by Pod 153, "We may be perpetually trapped in this cycle of life and death, but why would we let that become our focus? Life isn't about how it starts and ends, it's everything in between. We've witnessed it throughout this entire game. 9S and 2B, in the end, were only made to perpetuate a lie, a seemingly meaningless existence. Yet, they were able to see beauty in life, beauty in love, beauty in family, beauty in all of the things that make us human. They've now been granted another chance at the beautiful thing that it is life. And sure, maybe they might end up exactly as last time. Maybe it was all for nothing in the end. But maybe, just maybe, they set down a new path. One that we could never even imagine. The future is not given to you. It's something you need to take for yourself. I want to keep talking about the significance of this story, but there's one last thing I need to add to ending E. Those players that helped you push through, at the final bullet hell sequence, made a choice. They made a choice to give up their entire journey, start again from square one with nothing, simply for the purpose of helping someone they'll never even know of. You yourself are given the same choice. Will you give up your save file in order to save someone else? You can leave a final message which will show up for other people's playthroughs, even if you decide to keep it. Talk about exploiting both my emotions and video games to make probably the most ambitious and unique game I'll ever play. NieR Automata means the world to me. This is a story that could not have been told through another format. The layers, complexity in storytelling, and even theme and setting choices using this dystopian world in where androids and machines are the predominant life form. This humanist concept can and has been told before through many a story, but this is the most not only effective and relatable, but enjoyable humanist story that I've ever seen. While the predominant theme is existentiality, what is existence? Why do we exist? What is our purpose? And changing our way of thinking about life. There are countless other topics, especially philosophical ideologies, which honestly, I'm not the person for. There is one other thing that NieR Automata does though, and that's highlight the importance and significance of things we as a human race have taken for granted. When you view family or love from the perspective of a machine where that is their life, they become so infatuated with that one thing. Sure, it's to an almost unhealthy level at times, but it goes miles to showing the importance of these things that we as a human race have evolved so far that these concepts are almost an entitlement to most. Something I wanted to save until the end was that story of Devil and Popola, because these two are another complexity to add into that existentiality topic. For them, life was forced to be guilt-ridden. Their entire purpose and why they existed was to live in constant guilt and regret for a crime that their predecessors committed. And their death, while absolutely a tragic one, at least it was one that they chose. And there's some morbid comfort in the fact that they can still be together forever, but under the control of no one. While NieR Automata is dark, it's also a celebration of just how beautiful this gift of life can be. And that's something that we all need to realize more often. We've been gifted this opportunity. It'll be hard at times, but in the end, it's up to you whether you allow your life to turn into a blessing or a curse. And that sure is beautiful, now isn't it?